I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but in all the stories that we've told about Jesus, he's hanging out with all kinds of different people. So like last week, he was hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, and that was a problem for some people. In other stories, he's hanging out with his closest friends, mostly fishermen. In other stories, he's hanging out with people that want to be healed, and they're going after him just to be near him and hopefully to receive some sort of a healing. And other times he's with some of his other friends like Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And in other stories, he's with the religious elite. Now that's a fancy phrase for people that have a place of importance in the synagogue. They're like the people that everyone would go to for advice or for help interpreting the Old Testament. They were kind of like the pastors, but even beyond that. They were these religious people who were super important, and when you saw them walking down the streets, it's almost like, whoa, that's a Pharisee. That's them. And you'd be really excited about this. Well, in this one story, Jesus is invited to a dinner party at the house of a Pharisee, one of the groups of religious elites at the time. And everybody there is super excited to be in the room. And they all want to sit near the Pharisee. He's the host of the party. And at this time, like when you sat down, the host of the party, the person whose house you were in, would sit at the head table and sit right in the middle. And the closer you were to that person, the more important you were. So when the Pharisee sits down, everybody just starts going for it, trying to sit right next to him because they wanted to be important too. And when Jesus sees this happening, he says a couple of things. The first thing he says is, oh gosh, guys, don't try to make yourselves feel important by sitting next to the host of the party. Just pull up a chair and enjoy being in the space. They actually didn't have chairs at these meals. They would just kind of recline and sit on their side and lean on their elbow. But you get what I'm saying. Jesus is like, just be in the room. And if somebody says, hey, I want you to be closer to me, then let that happen. And if you're sitting here and they say you should go over there to make room for this other person, then that should happen too. It'd be like if I was sitting here and I said, listen, hey, Jack Rogers, I love how you hang out with Abe and Jude, and I love how you kind of like you become like this older brother for Abe, and you just kind of teach them stuff that they might not know. Like, I love that about you, and I love that you're able to do that for my kids. Or you could say something like, Claire, Claire, you are so eloquent in how you speak and how you think. You're wise beyond your years, but I love seeing how you sing songs when we sing together in church. When I see you, it's moving. I love that. And for both of you to hear those really cool things spoken about you, it's nice, but it's not something that you were trying to prove to me. It's just something that you do. And if I can acknowledge that, then hopefully you can say, oh, that's really cool. I'm glad that that's happening. Instead of you trying to say, look at me singing, I'm so important. Or Jack with the kids, like, look how I am being an older brother to Abe. That's something that's different. And Jesus says, don't do that. If people have good things to say about you, great. But if not, then just be in the room and learn to engage. And he also says to the Pharisee, he says, listen, I've also noticed that at this party, we all look pretty similar, and we all maybe think pretty similar, except for Jesus, he was rogue, but all of your friends here, they're your friends, and they look like you, and they think like you, and they act like you, and they're just here. And then in a month or so, when your friend has a dinner party, he's gonna invite you, and it's just gonna be this ongoing thing and whatever. Instead, what you should do, instead of inviting all your friends, you should invite people that might not get invited otherwise. You should use this opportunity, he says to the Pharisee, you should use this opportunity to invite people that you're not friends with yet to be here. And maybe even when they come, you can let them sit at the head of the table, because that would be meaningful for them. And yeah, they're not going to invite you back over because they probably don't have the money to afford a big dinner party like this. It's really swanky and you've got a cheese plate and everything's really cool. But your reward will be later. In fact, your reward might just be gaining insight from the conversation that you have and the friendships that are formed. And Jesus is saying to the people in the seats, don't try to be more important than you are, and also don't care if people think you're important. And to the host, he's saying, invite people that don't look like you to become part of your friends. And I think we can learn a lot from this story about Jesus, right? It's really practical. And I hope that as we live our lives, we can do two things. One, we can be consistent, we can be humble, we can do things not so that people will say stuff about us, but just because it's the right thing to do. And I hope that when we have the opportunity, maybe like at a birthday party or when we're going somewhere and your mom and dad says you can invite whoever, maybe we have those moments to invite people that we wouldn't normally invite so that we can learn from them and get to know them and be kind to folks. So this is like a really practical story, and I'm hopeful that as we begin to think what Jesus is about, that some of these traits will become part of how we live too, to be humble and to be inclusive and to love people well. Man, I hope that sits with us, and I hope that we're able to apply that.